the Addams Family.
Welcome to Graves of the Addams Family. Over the next little while, we're going to visit the final resting places of 15 people connected to one of the most beloved television shows in American history, the original 1964 Addams Family series. We'll travel from the grand old cemeteries of Southern California to a pet cemetery on Long Island, from a mausoleum in Anaheim to a hilltop in Puerto Rico. Along the way, you'll meet child stars and circus performers, a cartoonist who loved graveyards, and the Wicked Witch of the West. Not everyone on this tour has a traditional grave. Some were cremated, some had their ashes scattered at sea or over a country meadow, and one, as you'll hear, ended up in the backyard of his own house. But each of these 15 people left a mark on something enduring, and their stories deserve to be told. So snap your fingers twice, and let's begin. Our first stop is Melrose Abbey Memorial Park in Anaheim, California. It's a quiet place, low-slung buildings, neatly trimmed hedges, a Spanish-style chapel tucked behind wrought iron gates. You could drive right past it on your way to Disneyland and never give it a second look. But inside the Abbey Mausoleum, behind a modest plaque, rest the ashes of Carolyn Jones, the woman who brought Morticia Addams to life. For 2 seasons, 64 episodes, Jones was the dark heart of the Addams family, gliding through scenes in that iconic black dress, clipping the blooms off roses and keeping only the thorns. She had a quality that was equal parts elegance and mischief, a raised eyebrow here, a knowing smile there, and her chemistry with John Astin's Gomez became one of television's great love stories, passionate, playful, and completely sincere. Charles Addams, the cartoonist who created the characters, personally chose Jones for the role after seeing her on screen, and it's easy to understand why. She looked like she'd stepped out of one of his drawings. But Jones was far more than Morticia. Born Carolyn Sue Jones in Amarillo, Texas in 1930, she suffered from severe childhood asthma that kept her home from school for long stretches. Unable to play outside with other children, she turned inward, devouring Hollywood fan magazines and dreaming of the movies. By the time she was a teenager, she had made up her mind. At 17, she talked her way into the Pasadena Playhouse, one of the most respected acting schools on the West Coast, and within a few years, a talent scout signed her to Paramount Pictures. Her early career reads like a roll call of Golden Age Hollywood. She appeared in House of Wax with Vincent Price, one of the first 3D films, and then came a 6-minute role in the 1957 film The Bachelor Party that changed everything. In those 6 minutes, Jones played a lonely young woman at a party in Greenwich Village with such raw vulnerability that it earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. She shared the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year with Sandra Dee that same season. She appeared alongside Elvis Presley in King Creole, opposite Frank Sinatra in A Hole in the Head, and worked with Kirk Douglas, Dean Martin, and Anthony Quinn. And here's a detail that stings a little. Jones was originally cast as Alma Burke in From Here to Eternity, a role that seemed tailor-made for her. But she had to withdraw due to pneumonia. Donna Reed took over and won the Oscar. Her second husband was Aaron Spelling, and they were married from 1953 through most of the Addams family's production, before divorcing in 1964, the year the show premiered. Spelling, of course, went on to become one of the most prolific television producers in history. Dynasty, Charlie's Angels, Beverly Hills 90210. After the show ended, Jones continued working steadily, taking roles in the landmark miniseries Roots on Fantasy Island and in various television films. Her final role was on the CBS soap opera Capital, where she played the scheming Myrna Clegg. By then, she had been diagnosed with colon cancer. This was 1981, and she knew the prognosis wasn't good. But she kept performing, sometimes from a wheelchair, in visible pain, because the work mattered to her and she wanted to keep going for as long as she could. Knowing time was short, she married her boyfriend of 5 years, Peter Bailey Britton, in a quiet ceremony in September of 1982. Jones died the following August, on the 3rd of the month, at the age of 53. Her ashes were placed here in Anaheim, beside her mother, in a cemetery most people never think to visit. Now let's leave Southern California entirely and travel all the way to the eastern end of Long Island, to the village of Sagaponack, New York. This is farm country, flat fields, potato farms, old money. There, on a private estate that its owner called the Swamp, lies one of the most unusual final resting places on our entire tour. This is where we find Charles Addams, the man who dreamed all of this up in the first place. His ashes are buried in the pet cemetery on his own property. Not the family plot, not a grand monument, the pet cemetery. And if that sounds like something out of one of his cartoons, well, that's exactly the point. Everything about Addams's relationship with death had a kind of gleeful irreverence. He got married to his third wife, Marilyn, in that same pet cemetery in 1980. When it came time to think about his own arrangements, he requested a wake instead of a funeral. He wanted people to have a good time, and he said he simply wanted to be remembered as a good cartoonist. Addams was born in 1912 in Westfield, New Jersey, a tidy suburban town about 25 miles from Manhattan. Even as a boy, he had a peculiar sensibility. He loved wandering through the local Presbyterian cemetery, studying the headstones, and wondering what it was like to be dead. He drew constantly, encouraged by his father, who recognized the talent early. His childhood home on Elm Street, a brooding Victorian, later became the widely accepted model for the Addams Family mansion, though Addams himself never confirmed this. After studying at Colgate University and the Grand Central School of Art in New York, he found his way to the New Yorker magazine, where his first cartoon appeared in 1933. He was 21 years old. Over the next 5 decades, Addams published more than 1,300 cartoons for the magazine. Many featured a recurring cast of ghoulish characters living in a decrepit Victorian mansion. A gaunt, ethereal woman, a round, bald man with dark-circled eyes, a towering Frankenstein-like butler, a wizened old crone. They had no names. They were simply the Addams Family, in the way readers referred to them, and for years, that was enough. It wasn't until television producer David Levy approached Addams in the early 1960s about adapting the characters for a sitcom that Addams was forced to give each one a name and a proper personality. Morticia, Gomez, Lurch, Grandmama, Wednesday, Pugsley, all christened for the first time. The show premiered on ABC in September of 1964. Before all that, though, Addams had an unusual day job that tells you a lot about his temperament. In 1933, fresh out of art school, he worked in the layout department of True Detective magazine, where his task was to retouch photographs of actual crime scenes, specifically to remove the blood from photographs of murder victims so they could be published. He later remarked with characteristic dryness that a lot of those corpses were more interesting the way they were. During World War II, he made animated training films for the Army Signal Corps, and he was, somewhat improbably, distantly related to Presidents John Adams and John Quincy Adams, despite the different spelling of the surname. He was also a first cousin twice removed of the social reformer Jane Addams. He suffered a heart attack on September 29, 1988, while sitting in his car in front of his apartment building on West 75th Street in Manhattan. He had just parked. He was 76. In lieu of a funeral, a party was held in his honor at the New York Public Library with jazz bands and champagne, exactly the kind of send-off he would have wanted. Shortly after his death, a cartoon appeared. Whether apocryphal or actually published, the story has been told so often it's become legend, showing the Addams family standing solemnly at a grave while Charles crawled out the other side. It's the kind of gag he would have drawn himself. From an artist's private estate, we head back to California and one of Hollywood's most storied Catholic cemeteries, Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. This sprawling, beautifully landscaped ground holds the remains of Bing Crosby, Bela Lugosi, Sharon Tate, and Rita Hayworth, among many others. And here, in a more modest section, lies Jackie Coogan, the man who became Uncle Fester. But long before he shaved his head and put a light bulb in his mouth for laughs, Coogan was arguably the most famous child in the world, and his life story reads like a Hollywood cautionary tale that rewrote American law. In 1921, at just 6 years old, Jackie Coogan starred opposite Charlie Chaplin in The Kid. It was Chaplin's first full-length feature as a director, and the pairing of the world's greatest comedian with this saucer-eyed little boy was electric. The film made Coogan an international sensation overnight. He was the first true child star in Hollywood history, and also the first to be heavily merchandised. His face appeared on peanut butter jars, dolls, whistles, stationery sets, and figurines. By the age of 9, he was earning $22,000 a week, a staggering sum for the 1920s. He toured internationally, drawing enormous crowds in Europe and Asia, and even led a humanitarian campaign to raise money for children displaced by the Greek-Turkish War, traveling overseas to personally deliver aid. Then, tragedy struck. On May 4, 1935, 20-year-old Jackie was riding in a car on a winding mountain highway near San Diego when another vehicle forced them off the road. The car plunged down an embankment. Jackie's father, his best friend, the young actor Junior Durkin, and 2 other passengers were killed. Jackie survived with 2 broken ribs and bruises. But the real damage was deeper than any bone. He had lost his father, the man who had been his closest companion and protector. And then came the betrayal that would make his name a synonym for exploitation. When Coogan turned 21 and asked about his earnings, an estimated $3 to $4 million, the equivalent of well over $50 million today, he discovered that his mother and her new husband, his former business manager Arthur Bernstein, had spent nearly all of it. Fur coats, diamonds, expensive cars, real estate. His mother's response when confronted was chillingly blunt. She told reporters, "No promises were ever made to give Jackie anything. Every dollar a kid earns before he is 21 belongs to his parents." Coogan sued, and the resulting trial was front-page news across the country. But after years of litigation and legal expenses, he recovered just $126,000, a fraction of what had been taken. The public outcry led directly to the California Child Actors Bill of 1939, universally known as the Coogan Act, which requires that a portion of a child performer's earnings be set aside in a court-supervised trust. Every child actor working today, from the youngest Disney Channel star to the kids in Stranger Things, is protected by a law that bears Jackie Coogan's name. Coogan served with distinction in the Army Air Forces during World War II, volunteering for one of the most dangerous assignments in the war. He became a glider pilot, landing Allied troops behind Japanese lines in Burma in operations that had terrifyingly high casualty rates. He received the Air Medal for his service. After the war, he rebuilt his career on television, taking character roles through the 1950s and early 60s, and then, in 1964, at 50 years old, he found the role that gave him a whole new generation of fans, the bald, excitable, electrically charged Uncle Fester on the Addams Family. It was a perfect match for Coogan's natural comic instincts and rubbery expressiveness. The character's signature trick, putting a light bulb in his mouth and making it glow, was achieved with a small battery concealed in Coogan's cheek. But you'd never know it from watching. He sold it completely, his eyes bulging with delight every time the bulb lit up, like a man discovering electricity for the first time. You could see in his performance a lifetime of experience. The timing of a man who had worked with Chaplin as a child, the fearlessness of a man who had survived a war, and the resilience of a man who had lost everything and kept going. He was briefly married to Betty Grable, the most famous pinup girl in America, in the late 1930s. That marriage lasted barely a year. He married 3 more times after that. His 4th wife, Dorothea, was at his side when he died of cardiac arrest on March 1, 1984, at the age of 69. He had suffered from heart trouble and hypertension for years. His funeral, at his own request, was open to the public, and his Addams Family co-star John Astin delivered the eulogy, calling Coogan one of the most generous men he'd ever known. From one of Hollywood's oldest cemeteries, we make our way north through the San Fernando Valley to Eden Memorial Park in Mission Hills, California, a Jewish cemetery tucked into the brown hills at the edge of the valley. This is where we find Vic Mizzy, the man who gave the Addams family its immortal sound. You know his work, even if you've never heard his name. 2 finger snaps and a harpsichord. That's all it took to create one of the most recognizable theme songs in television history. Mizzy was born in Brooklyn in 1916 and was largely self-taught as a composer, picking up the accordion and piano as a child by listening to the radio and figuring out the melodies on his own. During the 1930s and 40s, he wrote popular songs that were recorded by some of the biggest names in music, including Doris Day, whose 1945 hit, "My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time," became one of the best-selling records of the war years. But Mizzy's lasting fame came from television. When he was hired to compose the score for the Addams Family, Mizzy faced an immediate problem. The production company, Filmways, was working on a tight budget and refused to pay for professional singers. So, Mizzy did something resourceful. He sang the theme himself, recording his own voice and then overdubbing it 3 times to create the impression of a small vocal group. He played the harpsichord that gives the melody its antique, slightly sinister quality, a sound that immediately sets the mood before a single image appears on screen. During the filming of the title sequence, Mizzy was on set, coaching each member of the cast on how to snap their fingers in precisely the right rhythm. 2 snaps, perfectly timed, in the gap between phrases. Ted Cassidy, in character as Lurch, punctuated the chorus with the words neat, sweet, and petite, a touch that Mizzy had written specifically for him. Those finger snaps made Mizzy a wealthy man. He had negotiated to retain the publishing rights to the theme, which meant that every time the song was played at a sporting event, used in a commercial, or featured in one of the later Addams Family films or animated series, Mizzy collected royalties. He once told an interviewer with obvious satisfaction, "2 finger snaps and you live in Bel Air." He also composed the theme for Green Acres, another of the decade's most recognizable TV melodies, 2 iconic themes from one man. Mizzy continued scoring films and television into the 1990s, and he remained sharp and witty well into old age. He died of heart failure at his Bel Air home on October 17, 2009, at the grand age of 93. When asked late in life what he wanted on his tombstone, he reportedly said he hadn't given it much thought. The music would outlast any inscription. Let's step away from the cemeteries for a moment and visit a residential neighborhood in Woodland Hills, a quiet suburb in the western San Fernando Valley. There's no headstone to find here, no cemetery gate to walk through, no directory to consult. The ashes of Ted Cassidy, the towering actor who played Lurch, were buried in the backyard of his home after his death in 1979. It was done at his request, privately, by his family. It's one of the more unusual resting places on our tour, and over the years, the exact location has become something of a mystery, as subsequent owners of the property may not have even known what was beneath their lawn. Cassidy was born in Pittsburgh in 1932 and raised in the small town of Philippi, West Virginia, in the Appalachian foothills. He was 6 feet, 1 inch tall by the age of 11. He kept growing. By adulthood, he stood 6 feet 9 inches and had hands the size of dinner plates. He had a condition called acromegaly, a disorder of the pituitary gland that causes the body to produce excessive growth hormone, which gave him his imposing frame and distinctive features. It also, quietly and relentlessly, weakened his heart. After graduating from Stetson University in Florida with a degree in speech and drama, Cassidy moved to Dallas, Texas, where he found work as a disc jockey at WFAA radio. His deep, resonant voice was perfect for the medium. He was on the air on November 22, 1963, the day President Kennedy was assassinated, and was among the first broadcasters to interview eyewitnesses to the shooting in Dealey Plaza. Within a year, he had moved to Hollywood, and it was there that he landed the role that would define his career, and to his lasting frustration, trap him inside it. Lurch was originally written as a non-speaking character, consistent with the silent, looming butler in Charles Addams's cartoons. But during the filming of the pilot, when Cassidy made his first entrance in response to the pull of a bell rope and the crash of a gong, he ad-libbed 2 words in that extraordinary, cavernous baritone, "You rang?" The line got such an enormous reaction from the cast and crew that the producers immediately expanded Lurch into a speaking role. It became one of the most quoted catchphrases in 60s television. Cassidy also played Thing, the disembodied hand that emerged from small wooden boxes around the Addams household to deliver mail, answer the telephone, and offer moral support. In scenes where Thing and Lurch appeared together, a body double stood in for Cassidy while his real hand performed in the box. Beyond the show, Cassidy had a surprisingly varied career. He appeared as Harvey Logan, the knife-throwing outlaw, in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid alongside Paul Newman and Robert Redford. He played the ancient android RUK on an episode of Star Trek that remains a fan favorite. He later provided the opening narration for the Incredible Hulk television series, Don't Make Me Angry, You Wouldn't Like Me When I'm Angry, and the Hulk's signature animalistic growl. In 1965, at the height of the show's popularity, he even released a novelty single called The Lurch, attempting to cash in on the same dance craze market that had given us the Monster Mash. Despite all of this, Cassidy was frustrated by typecasting. His size meant he was almost always cast as monsters, heavies, or freaks. In a 1978 interview, shortly before his death, he said something that stays with you. He had never been proud of any of his roles, and he was still waiting for the one he'd want to be associated with. He died on January 16, 1979, at the age of 46, from complications following open-heart surgery to remove a non-malignant tumor near his aorta, almost certainly a consequence of his acromegaly. He left behind a wife and 2 children. A memorial service was held at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Hollywood Hills, and then his ashes came home to Woodland Hills, to the backyard where his children played. Speaking of memorable characters, let's travel to a very different kind of resting place, or rather no resting place at all. Margaret Hamilton, who played Morticia's mother, Granny Frump, on 3 episodes of The Addams Family, was cremated after her death, and her ashes were scattered over her property near the village of Amenia, New York, in the rolling farmland of the Hudson Valley. There is no grave to visit, no marker to find, no headstone to photograph. But the legacy she left behind is enormous, far larger, in fact, than the 3 Addams Family episodes might suggest. You know Margaret Hamilton. Everyone does. She was the Wicked Witch of the West in the 1939 classic The Wizard of Oz, one of the most iconic villains in the history of motion pictures. The American Film Institute ranked her the 4th greatest screen villain of all time and the single greatest female villain ever put on film. In a performance that lasted just 12 minutes of screen time, 12 minutes, Hamilton terrified generations of children so thoroughly that the image of her green face and pointed hat became the universal symbol of wickedness in American culture. The role was physically punishing too. During the filming of her fiery exit from Munchkinland, a pyrotechnic effect went wrong, and Hamilton suffered severe burns to her face and hands, keeping her off the set for weeks. She returned to finish the film, but for the rest of her life, she bore the scars beneath her makeup. When she reprised the witch role in a 1976 episode of Sesame Street, hoping to teach children that the character was just a friendly woman in a costume, the episode had to be pulled from rotation after a single airing because parents flooded the network with complaints that their children were too frightened to watch. The irony is that Hamilton was, by all accounts, one of the gentlest people in Hollywood. Before she became an actress, she was a kindergarten teacher in Cleveland, Ohio, and she never lost that vocation. Throughout her life, she served on school boards, volunteered with children's therapy groups, and championed arts education. She understood better than most that the line between terror and delight is thinner than people think, which may be why she was so perfectly at home in the world of the Addams Family. As Granny Frump, she fit right into the clan, cackling and stirring potions with the same energy she'd brought to Oz. but this time surrounded by a family that would have adored the Wicked Witch, not feared her. In her later years, Hamilton became recognizable to yet another generation as Cora, the kindly country storekeeper in a long-running series of Maxwell House coffee commercials. It was a warm, homey role, about as far from the Wicked Witch as you could get, and she played it for years. She died of a heart attack in a nursing home in Salisbury, Connecticut, on May 16, 1985, at the age of 82. She had been living near her son, Hamilton Meserve, in the Hudson Valley for many years by then, and it was to that countryside that her ashes returned. Now we return to the Grand Memorial Parks of Los Angeles. Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale is one of the most famous cemeteries in the world, a place that markets itself less as a graveyard than as an art museum and garden, with reproductions of Michelangelo's sculptures and sweeping views of the San Gabriel Mountains. Clark Gable is here, Humphrey Bogart, Walt Disney, Jimmy Stewart, Jean Harlow, hundreds of legends resting in the California sunshine. And among them, in a quieter section, away from the tourist maps, rests Blossom Rock, the woman who played Grandmama on the Addams Family. She's not famous enough to be on the guided tour, but her story has a twist that most people never knew. Blossom Rock was the older sister of Jeanette MacDonald, the glamorous soprano and film star of the 1930s, the woman who appeared opposite Nelson Eddy in a string of enormously popular MGM musicals and who sang with Clark Gable in San Francisco. MacDonald was one of the biggest names in show business, a genuine diva in the old-fashioned sense of the word, and her older sister Blossom spent most of her career making sure nobody knew they were related. It wasn't bitterness. By all accounts, the sisters were fond of each other. It was something closer to dignity. Blossom wanted whatever success she achieved to be her own. Born Edith Marie Blossom MacDonald in Philadelphia in 1895, she performed in vaudeville as a child alongside her younger sister. While Jeanette rose through the ranks to become a genuine movie star, Blossom took a quieter, more modest path. She married actor Clarence Rock in 1926, and the two performed together as a vaudeville duo billed as Rock and Blossom. When she transitioned to film, she adopted the stage name Marie Blake, deliberately choosing not to trade on her famous sister's name. It was a matter of pride. Under that name, she appeared in well over 100 films at MGM, most of them in small or uncredited roles. Her most notable recurring part was as Sally, the cheerful switchboard operator, in 9 installments of the popular Dr. Kildare film series in the late 1930s and early 40s, a character who became a small favorite with audiences, even though she never had top billing. In the 1950s, she began using her real name again, and in 1964, at the age of 69, she landed the role that finally made her famous in her own right. The spellcasting, potion-brewing, delightfully unhinged Grandmama Addams. She appeared in all 64 episodes, and she threw herself into the part with evident glee, mixing bubbling concoctions and offering dubious medical advice with the conviction of someone who had waited a long time for the right role. In December 1967, not long after the show's cancellation, Rock suffered a debilitating stroke that affected her speech and mobility. She was unable to rejoin her castmates for the 1977 reunion television film Halloween with the new Addams Family, though she reportedly watched it from the motion picture and television Country House and Hospital, the retirement home for entertainment industry veterans in Woodland Hills. She died on January 14, 1978, at the age of 82, and was laid to rest here at Forest Lawn alongside her husband Clarence. Her famous sister Jeanette had preceded her in death by more than a decade. Back in the San Fernando Valley, let's visit Valhalla Memorial Park Cemetery in North Hollywood. It's a modest place. Flat lawns, a few shade trees, a scattering of bronze plaques set into the grass. Nothing grand about it. But this is where Ken Weatherwax, television's Pugsley Addams, was finally laid to rest, though it took a few years and a crowdfunding campaign to make it happen. And that fact alone tells you something about what it was like to be a child star in the 1960s. Weatherwax came from a show business family, deeply embedded in the industry, though not in front of the cameras. His aunt was the dancer and actress Ruby Keeler, famous for her starring roles in 1930s Busby Berkeley musicals at Warner Brothers. His half-brother, Joey Vieira, played Porky on the first 3 seasons of Lassie, and his uncles, Frank and Rudd Weatherwax, were the trainers and owners of the original Lassie, perhaps the most famous animal actor in television history. So, when Ken landed a Gleam toothpaste commercial as a little boy, nobody in the family was surprised. He was cast as Pugsley Addams at the age of 9, and he played the role for all 64 episodes, returning for the 1977 reunion film Halloween with the new Addams Family. But when the show ended, the work dried up. Weatherwax was typecast, not because he wasn't talented, but because audiences couldn't see him as anyone other than Pugsley. He struggled in school too, where classmates mocked him for playing a character with that name. He later told an interviewer, with disarming honesty, "Frankly, I didn't deal with it very well. I was kicked out of about 6 or 7 schools and went into the service at 17. He enlisted in the Army, served his time, and after his discharge, he built a career behind the camera as a studio grip and set builder. Honest, physically demanding work that kept him connected to the industry without requiring him to be on screen." In his later years, as nostalgia for the show grew, he embraced the Addams Family legacy with good humor, appearing at fan conventions and autograph shows. He often appeared alongside his old co-star Lisa Loring, who had played his on-screen sister Wednesday, and the two remained close friends their entire lives, a genuine bond that had started when they were children on the same soundstage. Weatherwax died of a heart attack on December 7, 2014, at his home in West Hills, California. He was 59 years old. His remains were cremated, but for a time his family lacked the funds for a permanent memorial. A crowdfunding campaign organized by Scott Michaels of Dearly Departed Tours, a company that runs tours of celebrity graves and death sites in Los Angeles, raised enough money to have Weatherwax's ashes interred here at Valhalla Memorial Park in 2017, more than 2 years after his death. It was a small, dignified service, attended by fans who had never met him, but felt they knew him. There's something that catches in the throat about that. A boy who was famous at 9, forgotten at 15, and remembered at last by strangers who grew up watching him on afternoon reruns. Not far from Valhalla, at one of Hollywood's most iconic cemeteries, we can pay a kind of tribute to Lisa Loring, the original Wednesday Addams. Loring's ashes were cremated after her death in January of 2023, and according to reports, they were later interred at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, the grand old burial ground on Santa Monica Boulevard that is the final resting place of Rudolph Valentino, Douglas Fairbanks, Judy Garland, and Johnny Ramone. It's a fitting place for the actress who created one of the most enduring characters in American pop culture, and whose death came at a bittersweet moment, just weeks after Jenna Ortega's portrayal of Wednesday in the Netflix series had introduced the character to an entirely new generation of fans around the world. Loring was born Lisa Ann DeCinces on Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands in 1958, where both of her parents were stationed with the United States Navy. After they divorced, she moved with her mother first to Hawaii and then to Los Angeles, where she began modeling at the age of 3. She was just 5.5 years old when she was cast as Wednesday Addams, so young that she later said she learned to memorize her lines before she could actually read. Think about that for a moment. A child who couldn't yet read a word was delivering precisely timed deadpan comedy on a nationally broadcast television show. Her performance set the template for every actress who would play Wednesday after her. That famous little shuffling dance, what the show called the droop, the flat, emotionless stare, the quiet menace of a girl who seemed like she might be the most dangerous person in any room. All of that started with Lisa Loring. Christina Ricci expanded on it in the 1991 and 1993 films, and Jenna Ortega took it to new heights in the Netflix series. Ortega herself acknowledged the debt publicly, saying she had paid homage to Loring's original shuffle in her own performance. After the Addams Family, Loring appeared on The Pruitts of Southampton with Phyllis Diller, made guest appearances on shows like Fantasy Island and Barnaby Jones, and had a recurring role as Cricket Montgomery on the soap opera As the World Turns from 1980 to 1983. But her personal life was marked by tragedy that went far beyond the usual Hollywood difficulties. Her mother died of alcoholism at the age of 34, leaving Loring without a stable home. She was married for the first time at 15, still a child herself, and she battled addiction for parts of her adult life, a struggle she later spoke about openly and without self-pity. On January 28, 2023, Loring suffered a massive stroke brought on by severe hypertension. She was rushed to Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, where she was placed on life support. After 3 days, when it became clear she would not recover, her family made the decision to let her go. She died peacefully, with both of her daughters holding her hands. She was 64. The timing of her death felt almost scripted. Netflix's Wednesday, starring Jenna Ortega, had premiered just 2 months earlier, in November of 2022, and had become a global phenomenon, the most watched English-language series in Netflix history at the time. The character Lisa Loring had originated nearly 60 years earlier was suddenly everywhere again, on billboards and magazine covers and Halloween costumes, just as the woman who created the role was leaving the world. With Loring's passing, John Astin, the original Gomez, became the sole surviving member of the 1964 Addams Family cast. Our next stop carries us out to sea, at least in spirit. Felix Silla, the man inside the Cousin Itt costume, was cremated after his death, and his ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean by the Neptune Society. There is no grave to visit, no marker, no stone, but his story is one of the most remarkable on this tour, and it deserves more than a passing mention. Silla was born in 1937 in the tiny mountain village of Roccacasale in the Abruzzo region of central Italy. He stood just 3 feet 11 inches tall and weighed about 70 pounds, dimensions that, in another era and another place, might have consigned him to a life on the margins. Instead, they opened the door to the circus. At 18, Silla emigrated to the United States and joined the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, where he spent 7 years performing as a trapeze artist, tumbler, and bareback horse rider. He traveled the country with the show, performing under the big top in a tradition that stretched back centuries. In 1962, he made his way to Hollywood and began picking up work as a stuntman, his agility and fearlessness making him a natural. 2 years later, he was cast as Cousin Itt on the Addams Family, a character that didn't even exist in Charles Addams's original cartoons. Cousin Itt was invented for the television series by the producers, and he became an instant fan favorite. Silla wore a body-length hairpiece, made, according to a contemporaneous Los Angeles Times interview, from real human hair, topped with a bowler hat and round sunglasses. His face was never seen. The character spoke in rapid, high-pitched gibberish that the other characters somehow understood perfectly, and the sound was actually provided in post-production by a sound engineer named Tony Magro, not by Silla himself. Silla appeared as Cousin Itt in 17 of the show's 64 episodes, and despite being completely hidden under all that hair, he gave the character a distinctive waddle and physical personality that made it feel real. After the Addams Family, Silla continued finding work wherever his small stature was an asset, and in Hollywood, that turned out to be surprisingly often. He played the robot Twiki, Mel Blanc's physical counterpart, on Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. He appeared as an Ewok, the one riding a hang glider, in Return of the Jedi. He had a role in the notorious 1974 Mel Brooks film Blazing Saddles. He even voiced a character in the Sims 2 video game decades later. He settled in Las Vegas, where he performed live with his own musical group, the original Harmonica Band, between film and television jobs. He married his wife Sue in 1965, the same year he first appeared on The Addams Family, and they remained together for 56 years. One of the longer marriages in Hollywood history, if you want to count it that way. Silla died of pancreatic cancer on April 16, 2021, at the age of 84. His Buck Rogers co-star Gil Gerard confirmed the news, writing, The only good I can draw from his passing is that he didn't suffer any longer. Another familiar face from the Addams family's guest roster was Parley Baer, who appeared in 6 episodes as the beleaguered insurance adjuster and neighbor Mr. Henson. If you're thinking, I know that name, you probably do, or at least you know the voice. Baer was one of those character actors whose presence was felt more than seen. Before television made him a regular face, he was one of the premier radio actors in Hollywood during the golden age of broadcast. He played Chester Proudfoot, the limping, anxious sidekick to Marshal Matt Dillon on the original radio version of Gunsmoke, a character that was later adapted for the television series as Festus, but played by a different actor. On screen, Baer appeared in everything from The Andy Griffith Show to Bewitched to The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet to Wagon Train. He had a warm, slightly anxious quality, a face that suggested a man who knew things were about to go wrong but couldn't quite figure out how to stop it. And that made him ideal for playing the confused, flustered, ordinary people who wandered into the Addams household and promptly lost their composure. Born in Salt Lake City, Utah in 1914, Baer served in the Army during World War II before building his career in radio and then television. He continued working steadily into the 1990s, with later credits including guest appearances on Seinfeld and Diagnosis Murder, proving that a good character actor never really goes out of style. He died on November 22, 2002, at the age of 88, from natural causes at his home in Thousand Oaks, California. He is interred at Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills, a sister cemetery to the Glendale location where we visited Blossom Rock earlier. From the recurring cast, let's move behind the camera to the man who shaped every script and set the comic tone that made the show work week after week. Nat Perrin was the head writer and producer of The Addams Family, and if you've ever wondered why the series has the timing and energy of a Marx Brothers picture, here's your answer. Perrin had been a close personal friend of Groucho Marx since the early 1930s, and he wrote or co-wrote several of the Marx Brothers films, including The Big Store. He brought that same brand of anarchic wordplay, screwball timing, and cheerful absurdity to the Addams household. Under Perrin's guidance, the show's humor worked on a simple but brilliant premise. The Addams family was perfectly happy and well-adjusted. It was everyone else who had the problem. Mailmen fainted, insurance adjusters fled, neighbors crossed the street, and the Addamses, baffled by the outside world's squeamishness, kept right on being their generous, hospitable, slightly explosive selves. Perrin oversaw the story ideas, directed at least one episode himself, and by most accounts, rewrote every single script that aired during the show's 2-season run, polishing the jokes, sharpening the dialogue, and making sure the tone stayed consistent from week to week. Born in New York City in 1905, Perrin graduated from Columbia Law School but abandoned law almost immediately for comedy writing. A career move that probably tells you everything you need to know about his personality. His friendship with Groucho began when Perrin, still in his 20s, submitted an unsolicited script to the Marx Brothers and was invited to meet them. The two men hit it off immediately, and the friendship lasted decades. Beyond the Marx Brothers and the Addams Family, Perrin produced and wrote for various other television series and contributed to films throughout the 1940s and 50s. He also, and this is a wonderful footnote, provided the voice for Cousin Itt in some episodes, though he was never credited for it. That high-speed gibberish that the family listened to so attentively? That was their own producer, chattering away under a wig. Perrin died on December 8, 1998, at the age of 93, in Woodland Hills, California, the same community where Ted Cassidy's ashes are buried in a backyard just a few miles away. He lived long enough to see the Addams Family revived on the big screen in the 1991 and 1993 films, and long enough to know that the show he shaped had become a permanent part of American culture. And now we come to our final stop. We return to the question of where it all began, not with an actor or a writer or a composer, but with a producer's vision. David Levy was the man who took Charles Addams's New Yorker cartoons and turned them into a living, breathing television series. It was Levy who approached Addams with the idea in the early 1960s. It was Levy who convinced the famously private cartoonist to name his previously unnamed characters and to flesh out their world. And it was Levy who shepherded the show through development, casting, and production, and onto ABC's Friday night schedule in the fall of 1964, where it debuted the same week as CBS's The Munsters, a rival sitcom about a family of friendly monsters. The two shows were constantly compared, and they split the audience. The Munsters had slightly higher ratings overall, but the Addams Family had a sophistication and wit that set it apart. The Munsters were parodies of horror movies. The Addams Family were something stranger and more original. A family that wasn't monstrous at all, just different, and couldn't understand why anyone found them unusual. Levy was born in 1913 and had spent decades in the television industry before the Addams Family came along. He had served as a vice president at NBC during the early days of network television, working on variety shows and dramatic programs when the medium was still figuring out what it could be. He understood television's potential for warmth and intimacy, its ability to bring characters into people's living rooms week after week and make them feel like family. That understanding shaped every creative decision he made about the show. And he understood that the Addams Family's appeal lay not in making the characters frightening or grotesque, but in making them lovable. As he told a newspaper columnist in 1964, explaining his vision for the show, "We have made them full-bodied people, not monsters. They are not grotesque and hideous manifestations." That single creative decision, that warmth, that insistence on the family's essential goodness, their boundless love for each other and their disarming generosity toward the bewildered strangers who stumbled into their world, is what separated the Addams Family from a simple horror comedy and made it something lasting. After the series ended in 1966, Levy went on to develop The Pruitts of Southampton, which starred Phyllis Diller and featured Addams Family cast members John Astin and Lisa Loring. He continued working in television production for years afterward, though nothing else he created had the same cultural impact. Levy died on January 26, 2000, at the age of 86. And that brings us to the end of our tour. But before we go, there's one more thing worth saying. The Addams Family was always about death in a way. The family lived at 0001 Cemetery Lane. They kept a graveyard in their backyard, complete with headstones they visited like old friends. Morticia raised carnivorous plants and clipped the blooms off roses to keep only the thorns. Wednesday played with a headless doll named Marie Antoinette and set traps for her brother. Pugsley built working guillotines and electric chairs as school projects. Gomez blew up model trains with the ecstatic joy of a man who thought destruction was the highest form of art. But none of it was ever grim. None of it was ever dark. The Addams Family treated death the way they treated everything else, with curiosity, affection, and a complete absence of fear. They were the most alive family on television precisely because they were so comfortable with the things that frightened everybody else. They didn't hide from the macabre. They served it tea. And perhaps that's the best way to remember the 15 people we visited today. From a pet cemetery on Long Island to a backyard in Woodland Hills, from a crowd-funded memorial in North Hollywood to the Atlantic waves off the California coast, they rest in places as varied and unexpected as the family they created. They gave us something that has endured for more than 60 years, a family that taught us, with a snap of the fingers and a wink, that there's nothing so strange it can't be met with love. That's our tour. Thanks for walking along.